Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the ASICS Metaspeed Ray, which I actually got to run a marathon in yesterday, which is an absolute privilege. My friend Diego let me borrow it, so shout out to him. And I'll be talking about what I thought about this shoe after a couple runs in it, because I did my shakeout run in it and strides, and then I did the warm-up and then the race in the shoe. So I have a little bit of experience in the shoe in a short amount of time, and I have a few things I want to say about it. So before we start this video, comment below what racing shoes you use and also whether you tried the Metaspeed Ray or any other ASICS Metaspeed shoes and what your thoughts are on it, because I'd be curious to know. Now the good thing about this review is that I wasn't gifted the shoe, I'm just borrowing it and I genuinely want to buy it, so I'm going to give you my honest thoughts after testing it, whether I will buy it or not. So firstly, we're going to talk about the specs of the shoe. First of all, we got a 39.8mm stack height at the back, I think. So you can pretty much think of it as 40. And apparently, according to the ASICS website, there's a 5mm drop. So it should theoretically be 35mm here. But I've seen other shoe reviewers actually measure and get like 30, 31. So it's about a 9, 10mm drop apparently. But from my personal experience, it didn't feel like a 10mm drop. I would say it was somewhere more like 6mm drop. So I think 5mm drop seems relatively accurate. But either way, I don't think it matters too much, because one thing you should know, which we'll get into more later, is that the midsole is actually very soft. So when you put all your weight on it, you will actually compress the foam a little bit and it's going to feel like a lower drop than it actually is anyway. Now this shoe comes in at 129 grams in men's US 9 and I'm a US 11, so obviously it's going to be a tiny bit heavier than that. But I can tell you with absolute confidence that I have never had a shoe this light before, and it feels absolutely amazing. I do have the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, but this one feels even lighter than that, which is absolutely insane. And I think a lot of it comes down to how thin the upper is, how unstructured the upper is. Yeah, the foam itself is super lightweight as well with that ATPU foam, which we'll get into a bit more in a sec. But first, let's talk about the upper. So the ASICS Metaspeed Ray has a matrix upper. Matrix is spelled M-A-T-R-Y-X, and they actually use that in Salomon shoes as well. And they're actually known for being quite durable, which is really good. And you can actually tell from the shoe that it's actually very, very lightweight, thin, and breathable. But also very durable, which is actually such a huge plus in terms of the fact that it's actually going to last. It's not going to get holes in it. In the marathon that I recently did, I actually ran into a pothole and I thought the upper would have ripped, and I was like, crap, did I actually break someone else's shoe? And I had a look at the end and it's actually perfectly fine. And I actually did scrape the upper with the edge of the pothole and it was like a sharp area. So yeah, I was like, damn, my foot hurts, and I wouldn't be surprised if my foot's bleeding. That's how much it kind of hurt in the middle of the marathon, but it survived. It has no holes in it. It's actually quite durable and it passed the test in terms of durability, in my opinion. So moving on to the fit of the upper, I have a wide-ish foot and I found the toe box area quite accommodating, which is actually really good. There's a lot of space above the shoe as well. So if you have quite a thick or tall foot, it's gonna have no issues as well, in my opinion. So you got that nice little volume in the upper area. The laces, they use those serrated laces that they use in the Metaspeed Edge and the Vaporfly and the Alphafly and all that. And I really like these laces because, yeah, they stay done up and they don't come loose because of that serrated kind of characteristic of the laces. The tongue is also paper thin. It's super duper thin. It's always hard to describe what the tongue feels like, but if you have a look, you'll probably get a good idea of this sort of vibe. But yes, because it is paper thin, it does sometimes kind of scrunch up when you're lacing up, so it takes a little bit of adjustment sometimes. And the tongue doesn't seem to be gusseted, which actually probably plays a little part in terms of the tongue, you know, folding up and scrunching up a little bit. But again, as long as you have the time to adjust it, it's actually not a big deal and it's perfectly fine in my opinion. There's actually no structure in the heel, so you can actually bend it everywhere, which is really, really flimsy. So it's important to know that it's not that much of a structured upper, it's not going to give you that much support, but it's a very lightweight upper, which is really fun to run in. So now moving on to where all the magic happens, the midsole. It's an ATPU special iteration of it because it's slightly different to the ATPU foam that you get in the Metaspeed Edge and the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. But at the same time, it's not hugely different. Like, it is that soft sort of bouncy, reboundy foam. Like, it compresses, but then it decompresses really quickly as well. So you get that really nice bound and energy return sort of vibe. And it's also worth noting that it's one of the more flexible super shoes because of the fact that it's got that super soft foam and it doesn't have that plate the whole way through, because it only has that teardrop shaped plate that kind of sits right here. so it gives you that forefoot kind of rigidity. So I think that does contribute to that little bit of extra flex that you get at the back as well, which you don't normally see in shoes with this much of a high stack height. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? There's actually no perfect answer for this because obviously everyone has different biomechanics and everyone responds differently to different shoes. That's why there's no such thing as the best overall shoe for everyone, because it does depend on the person. But a more flexible shoe will obviously work the foot intrinsics a little bit more compared to a shoe with a really stiff carbon plate that doesn't flex at all, shifting up the load a little bit more towards the upper joints like the knee and the hip. But this one will kind of even out that load a little bit probably, which could be a good thing potentially. Another thing is, I find it interesting how the plate is only in the front half of the shoe and it's a teardrop shape, so you don't get that real stability sort of feel in terms of like the plate giving it that extra bit of structure. And especially combining it with that really soft foam, it actually feels quite unstable. Because when I was doing the hairpin turns, it did feel a bit dodgy. Like, obviously I didn't ever feel like I was gonna fall down or anything, but I definitely did feel decently unstable compared to other shoes that I own. So that's one thing to consider. It's probably not the best for a race where you have so many sharp turns and whatnot. Another thing I noticed was that on cobblestone, which is quite niche, not everyone has to run on cobblestone, but in my race, we had to run on cobblestone at marathon pace, obviously, and that kind of felt very unstable. Like, there were a few close calls in terms of rolled ankles, but luckily, knock on wood. Wait, where's wood? I've never rolled an ankle before, and yeah, I think my ankles are strong enough to handle it, but I definitely was going like that kind of a few times, because yeah, I didn't really want to slow down on the cobblestone. So yeah, it was a bit dodgy, but I got through it, which is the most important bit. Now, one thing to consider is that the teardrop shaped plate that you have at the front of the shoe kind of makes it seem like it's more of a forefoot shoe, like a forefoot striker shoe. But as a heel striker myself, like I only forefoot strike when I run like 5K pace or faster, I'd say. So at marathon pace, I'm probably landing on the heel a fair amount. And I still felt alright in it. And I would still genuinely consider buying the shoe because I liked it so much, even as a heel striker. But one thing I did notice though, and I find it really hard to explain how exactly, but if your form breaks down later in the marathon, it doesn't feel as good. So this really will help. If you're in good shape, you can hold good form for a long amount of time, and you just want to lock into a pretty fast pace for a long time. That's the sort of vibe that this is good for, but you have to be running with good form to kind of like it and also get that really good feeling out of the shoe. I don't think I would feel good jogging in it, so that's actually a good thing because I don't want to waste mileage on a shoe like this, which is really expensive. So the last thing I want to mention about the Midsole is that I've only put about 45 kilometers into the shoe so far, but you can actually see some visible creases in the Midsole already, which I believe in the run, pun unintended, talked about in their video, where you can see the creases, but it doesn't actually feel compressed at all. Because I think when they did a review after 100 miles, or it might have been 160 miles, they realized that it's actually not too bad in terms of the compression, because visible creases doesn't actually always imply that the shoe is dead or anything. So it's more of a cosmetic sort of crease thing rather than it feeling bad after 45 Ks. So I'd say there's probably going to be no issues in terms of durability. I would imagine that you're going to get a similar amount of durability compared to a lot of the other super shoes out there. So moving on to the outsole, you just got that ASICS grip rubber outsole, and it's kind of strategically placed and kind of minimized because of the fact that obviously with a shoe this light, all these factors are going to add up in terms of making the shoe heavier. And considering this is a very high performance running shoe, it's trying to cut down on as much weight as possible. So yeah, you actually don't see as much rubber in the back here, so that's quite exposed. That also does imply that this shoe is more for forefoot strikers, like I was saying earlier, with that forefoot plate at the front. So a lot of the tech inside the shoe kind of implies that it was made for forefoot strikers. But again, like I'm saying, I felt alright in it as a heel striker in the marathon, and I still felt like it helped me out a lot in the marathon too. And yeah, in terms of the grip itself, I actually found it really good, because I have had shoes in the past which aren't really good at gripping on wet concrete, and this one felt perfectly fine on wet concrete at all times. So from a grip standpoint, like gripping to the ground and not slipping, I felt really good. So the main instability comes from how soft the midsole is. Yeah, it's just so easy to just, you know, compress on one side more than the other. So that's why when you're doing those sharp turns, it kind of feels a little bit dodgy, but it's not to the point where it's a deal breaker. But you do have to slow down a little bit more than you might have to in other shoes, but maybe it does make up for it in the sense that it's actually really fast when you are running in a straight line. Like, you feel like you just lock in and just absolutely send it down straight roads. So I definitely enjoyed it a lot. Now, with the ASICS Metaspeed Edge and the Sky Tokyo being available as well for a cheaper price, it's pretty hard for a lot of people to justify getting this shoe. And I feel like it's a bit more niche, and you hear about people who have been disappointed with the shoe as well. Unfortunately, I do think that the best thing to do still, as always, is to be able to try it on in store, if they even let you try it on in store, because it's a very expensive shoe. I don't even know if they would. But if there are stores that let you try it, you should try it out. Even if it's just wearing this on one side and then the Metaspeed Edge on the other side, and just comparing what they feel like under the foot and that sort of thing. I wish I had my Metaspeed Edge Tokyo with me right now so that I can directly compare and give you a bit more thoughts on the differences. Another thing I thought I'd quickly mention is that right after doing strides in the Metaspeed Ray, I actually did a few strides in the Puma Fast Star as well. And the differences between those two shoes is that the Puma Fast Star is probably a little bit quicker in terms of turnover and snappiness, but the Metaspeed Ray definitely feels more bouncy. However, I still think that the Metaspeed would be kind of good for like 10k half, and the Puma Fast Star would be more like a 3k to 10k sort of shoe. So there is that little bit of overlap. And then for a marathon, I think having slightly more structure and slightly more firmness when you get that little bit of support, when you get a bit more fatigued in the later stages of a race, could be a bit handy. So yeah, I wouldn't say the Metaspeed Ray would be the best marathon shoe for a lot of people. But again, there's still a nuance to it, so I don't want to recommend anything specific, but you know, stuff like, again, the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, Saucony Endorphin Pro 4, that sort of thing might give you that little bit of extra support, because the Metaspeed Edge and Sky Tokyo have that Puma foam, which is a little bit firmer than the FF Leap ATPU foam, so that gives you that little more structured and balanced, sort of stable feeling. Yeah, there's no real shoe like this out there. I'm assuming the Pro Evo one is that sort of similar vibe, super duper lightweight, high energy return. But yeah, again, I've never tried the Pro Evo 1 or the Pro Evo 2 or anything like that, so I can't really talk much from that standpoint as well. And yeah, the rocker, which I didn't really talk about in this video, it's not super noticeable, mainly because you compress the foam so much that it kind of feels more gradual than it looks. Yeah, you would compress here and it would just slowly transition you onto that rocker. It's not a really noticeable rocker. And I think the rocker not being noticeable as much also comes down to the fact that the plate is not the most stiff thing either. Like, there is a bit of flex to the shoe. So I think those are two factors that make the shoe not feel as rockery, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either again. It's just a matter of preference, I'm assuming, and also whether you want to offload the MTP joint because you have like flexor hallucis tendinopathy or whatever. But I can say with absolute confidence that this has been one of the most fun shoes I've ever worn, and just holding a shoe this light actually feels ridiculous. Like, I actually can't believe that this is a shoe. The design is super cool as well. I love the white colorway. It looks sick, and yeah, I am super tempted to buy it. I don't know, maybe if this video does well enough and I can make some of the money back, then I might buy it. But if not, I'm not super desperate for it. I have a lot of good shoes already, like the Alpha Fly 3 and the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, which I'm pretty happy with. But if I do see this on a good deal, or if I go to Japan, which I am, and I see it for a cheaper price than I can get in Australia, then I might potentially splurge on this shoe. We don't know, but we'll find out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this short review of the Metaspeed Ray. If you want to know more about how I did in the marathon and my experience of it, I've already talked about it a bit on my Instagram and my Strava, but I will make a full video on it, so stay tuned for that. But apart from that, see you in the next video.